Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Cinema Wave Podcast. We are here. The juice is loose because we are talking about Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. This is our non-spoiler and spoiler thoughts. We'll start with the non-spoiler thoughts before we get into the full spoiler review for this episode. I am one of your hosts. My name is Darian Scalamoni, and we're so lucky to be joined for the first time by Rachel Ciani.
That's me.
How are you?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
So happy you're here. And we also have Vinny Albano.
Hello, hello.
So lots to talk about with this movie. I'm going to start with the confession that I made before we started recording.
God.
That I had not seen Beetlejuice until a couple days before we recorded this, which is crazy. I know it's a cardinal sin.
It is.
But I wanted to see it, obviously. I've always had interest in seeing it. For some reason, like whenever the ABC Family or Freeform like Halloween lineup always came out, I like always missed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, all right, so I have to watch this movie. Loved the original from when I had first seen it.
Amazing.
And now we have this movie that was in development for decades almost that they were trying to get this made.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get into this movie in particular, Rachel, obviously you contacted me
I did.
to come on this review to talk about Beetlejuice. So it's obviously a film that is near and dear to your heart. So tell me and Vinny, as well as the audience, why the original was one that you love so much and also why you wanted to talk about this film with us.
So I was raised on Tim Burton's films. So one of my first words was Jack, a la Jack Skellington. My family were obsessed with all of his stuff. Corpse Bride, Nightmare Before Christmas, even the ones that people don't really know. Frankenweenie and, all the little ones. So Beetlejuice has always been a huge one in my family. And we, no matter what, when it's on, the whole house stops and we just sit and watch it. I mean, the soundtrack is amazing. You have some incredible actors. Young Catherine O'Hara, who is just absolutely stunning. Winona, of course, and Michael Keaton. I could talk about Michael Keaton for hours and hours, but he is, in my opinion, one of, if not the best character actor that exists and is alive today.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's strong words.
I know.
So obviously you love the original movie.
Ugh.
What were your trepidations or excitement going into the sequel that took... The original film came out in 1988, and now it's 2024. So it took decades for this movie to get made. So where was your excitement level or trepidation level going into Beetlejuice?
I was really excited when they announced that it was actually happening because, 36 years, that's a long time. But when I was reading about it, anytime I see a sequel that far ahead, I'm a little nervous about it because a lot of the time sequels like that are not great. But when I read that Tim and Keaton were mainly the ones having the conversation, and Keaton said, I will not sign on to this unless we stick as close as we can to the original production aspect. So the practical effects and the makeup and as much as they can do, obviously they do have a little bit of CGI, but that's just kind of Hollywood now. So I was nervous. I also was really curious how they were going to do casting because two main characters kind of aren't in any movies right now because of problems. So I was really interested how they were going to pay homage to the original, as Tim so much likes to do. He also likes to put Easter eggs from all his other movies into each one. And then how they're also going to sort of modernize, quote unquote, it and create a story where now there's this child who is not Winona Ryder and how they connect all of it. I was interested. I wasn't super nervous. I was more interested in how it was going to happen.
Okay. Vinny, your thoughts on the original film and your, again, excitement level or nervousness going into the sequel that took 36 years to make.
Yeah, I come from a similar perspective actually, because Beetlejuice was a family favorite in my family, right? Growing up, I rewatched it just before seeing this Beetlejuice because we owned it on DVD. I went to the basement. I went through all our collections of DVDs because I knew we had it because I remember watching it countless of times when I was younger. And my family, my sister also loves this film, so it has a strong place in my heart. And I just think it's a wonderful, like, just super wacky and fun experience throughout. Going into Beetlejuice, on the other aspect, I didn't know much of how they were going to be tackling this, so I was hesitant. I was a little scared, especially hearing a friend's opinion who went to an early screening of this. But yeah, that was just my overall experience with the franchise.
Yeah. So for me, my experience even knowing about the film was that until I saw it, I didn't even know that Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis were in the movie, which is crazy. Like I thought so much of the story revolved around Winona Ryder, and I didn't think she was a
Right.
child
Mhm.
in the film. And then Michael Keaton's character,
Mhm.
and he's definitely like the definition of a supporting character in the original film. A little bit more of a main character in this one. I feel like he just gets
Yeah.
more screen time. But the thing for me was obviously like I was worried if it was going to feel dated, right? Like I was like, I'm seeing this movie 36 years after it came out. But I will agree, like the practical effects and the use of practical effects still, to me, stand the test of time over a lot of CGI that we get nowadays.
Mhm.
And the exciting thing with what I was looking forward to with this one was that it had a budget of $100 million, which doesn't sound like it's still $100 million,
Yeah.
but in comparison to a lot of other big blockbuster type films that are coming out nowadays, that's like a minuscule budget. Like I think when we reviewed Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Vinny, it was like very similar. That might have cost like 20 million more than this did.
Mhm.
And that also has like a lot of no-name actors, but it costs a lot of money for motion capture. This, you have Keaton, you have Catherine O'Hara, you get Winona Ryder to come back, and Jenna Ortega, who's like one of the biggest stars right now on the planet.
Mhm.
And I did see in interviews Tim Burton and Michael Keaton and Catherine O'Hara, I think, talking about how she was the key to get this movie made.
Mhm.
Like if someone of Jenna Ortega's caliber wasn't working with Tim previously on Netflix's Wednesday,
Right.
that wouldn't have been the entry point in which they were able to make this movie because it
Mhm.
took them so long. The first film was so successful. It made an animated series. There were tons of toys based on it. So many different reasons why they should have or could have made
Mhm.
a sequel earlier. And like you said, Rachel, there's so many problematic aspects in the current day and age with certain performers
Yeah.
that they're either not in this film or they have a really creative way
Of
of
going
putting
around
them in the
it.
film or going
Mm.
around it,
Yeah.
which we'll get to in the spoiler thoughts. But that's all our history with Beetlejuice. Now let's talk about our non-spoiler broad thoughts before we dive into the spoilers of what we thought about this movie, Beetlejuice. Rachel, we will start with you. Your overall non-spoiler thoughts.
Non-spoiler thoughts. As someone, like I said, whose world has included Tim Burton in his work my whole entire life, I was very happy with the result. I enjoyed it. I had a great time. I liked it. But Darian and I were just saying off camera, and we liked it. We didn't love it.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of different aspects of it. But I would still tell anyone who I talk to, go see it.
Yeah.
100%.
Vinny?
Yeah, I'm coming from a similar place. I feel like I'm a little bit more negative, just slightly. I enjoyed this film. It was fun.
Mhm.
I think that, like the first Beetlejuice, it has some great elements of comedy and just fun wackiness. I love seeing Tim Burton be Tim Burton and just go all out in some areas. But for me, the film struggles from one thing, and it just feels like it's juggling way too much. There are way too many subplots going on, and some of them get more attention than others, and it underwhelms the resolution of these subplots when that third act climax comes and it ties everything together. It was for such a short runtime, just way too much going on.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
there were some moments that just fell a lot flatter than I think they were intending them to be struck upon. But overall, it is enjoyable. It is fun. I don't think it's anywhere near the caliber of the original. I will say one thing. Danny Elfman, he always cooks on the soundtrack. The opening main titles to the original Beetlejuice, which he does like a reprisal in this one, is one of my favorite soundtrack tracks of all time. I have a D&D character in my campaign who's a jester, and whenever he shows up in our campaign, I always play the main titles from Beetlejuice. Like it's great, and he's cooking here. Anything Elfman touch, he's the goat. But yeah, those were my overall non-spoiler thoughts.
Yeah, so I would agree with what both of you guys said. If I was writing a review for this film, my headline would say "fun but overstuffed," because there's so much in this film that feels unnecessary. And I felt like towards the end of the film, I was asking myself, instead of focusing on what was happening, I was like, they could have done this without having this. There's a character in particular, which we can get into in the spoilers, that doesn't even need to be in the film. There's really two, but there's one that really doesn't need to be in the film. And they just use it for a plot device, which I get it. They want to make it bigger. They want to make it grander. This is a sequel that people were waiting on for such a long time. And they boosted the cast. Like, you have the returning people, but you also have Willem Dafoe. We already talked about Jenna Ortega, Monica Bellucci, and Justin Theroux all being added to the cast. So it's obviously going to lead to a lot more plot and those subplots, like Vinny alluded to, sort of coming into fruition. I agree. I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's a great movie. And I think the first one engrosses you in such a way that it also is part of its time, but it's timeless. Where this film, I feel like I'll watch it another couple times. I'll be like, oh, it's fun, but I'll never want to return to it the same way I want to return to the original film. And that's being someone who recently saw it for the first time 36 years after it came out. So, but I would agree with what Rachel said. And I think, Vinny, you'd probably echo the same sentiment, that you should go and see this movie in a theater. It's definitely, it has spectacle to it. It has the Tim Burton elements, and it does something that I think a lot of those legacy sequels that Rachel talked about doesn't do, in which it doesn't beat you over the head with the nods. It does a really great and organic job of like introducing the Easter eggs, and even just like doing the opening title sequences and sort of redoing that. Made it great and made you feel like you were getting yourself back into this world again. But I don't know if there was anything else non-spoiler, really, because there's a lot of spoiler stuff we have to talk about. So if you guys haven't had a chance to see this film, go and see it, pause our review, and then come back and listen to our spoiler thoughts. Or if you don't really care, you can continue on, because we're going to start talking spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Okay. Beetlejuice, full spoiler talk. I'm going to start with my biggest gripe.
Okay.
Monica Bellucci's character doesn't need to be in this film.
Yep.
At all. Now, here's the thing. I think she's a great actress. I think she's a great actress.
I love Monica Bellucci.
Gorgeous.
She has a great intro to the film, which also gets me excited, because I'm like, wow, this is a really creative way that they're going to introduce this character. She must be significant. Not significant at all. It's just a plot device in order to have somebody chasing down Beetlejuice. And the thing that bothers me about that is that in the original film, he just wants to get married to be out in the world anyway. And I understand if maybe the filmmaker's like, well, we've already done that. We don't want to do that again. Fine.
Great.
But it works.
Yeah.
And it keeps the movie more simple. It would probably cut down at least 12 minutes of runtime, cutting her character out of the film.
All the shots of her just running through the underworld, or the afterlife, it's just sort of...
I mean, she has 2 death sequences where she kills people,
right?
Which don't need to be in the movie.
No.
Though I did also appreciate the Danny DeVito cameo. Obviously, that was great to see.
What a gift! What a treat!
Seriously, but so that's the first character for me. And we can get into that if you guys want. The other one, as much as I love him, is Willem Dafoe's. Doesn't necessarily need to be in the film. Is there for the funny, comical gags, and it works sometimes, but other times it falls very flat. And I think his character work is good, and you love seeing Dafoe show up in a Burton movie. But you don't need, his character's not necessary to this film at all. So those are like 2 big gripes I have. Not the performances, but the utilization of these characters in order to kind of push the story ahead. They felt unnecessary, and I do feel like it was glaring they were unnecessary. And it could have made the movie better if you took them out of it. What did you think?
Yes. So the thing that I think I came out of the movie with the most, as far as gripes go, is that there were 3 storylines happening, and if they chose one, it would have been fine for the movie. So you could have chosen Beetlejuice's ex-wife, and that could have been the impetus for him trying to get out of the afterlife. Or you could have chosen, I don't remember the kid's name, but the ghost kid, who Jenna Ortega has a crush on, and that whole thing, and him trying to get back to life.
Jeremy.
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 I was like,
Jeremy.
What? Jeremy, that's right. That could have been its own storyline of trying to save Jenna Ortega from the afterlife, and then just the classic, like you said, idea of Beetlejuice coming back and trying to find Winona Ryder, or even better, going after Jenna Ortega now.
Yeah.
You know, so there too many balls were in the air, and the juggler did not know how to juggle very well. So yeah, I agree that there was a lot going on that didn't need to, and I'm so curious as to why. Did they think the other stories weren't enough, or was it more of a grab for more people?
I have a theory. I don't want to speculate, but so the two new storylines, or the two glaringly obvious storylines that probably could have been cut, is Astrid's relationship with Jeremy and Monica Bellucci's character.
Yeah.
To get Jenna to sign on, I bet you they needed her to be front and center at points.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
That's her getting front and center,
Well,
because
they
she's
gotta-
not for a lot of the movie.
No.
Which is I think that's not a bad thing for Jenna. I don't
Mhm.
think she necessarily needed to be in it, but I feel like maybe her agency was like, well, she needs to have something to do too.
Right.
Maybe that's what they had. And this is not me. I'm just trying to think in terms of current society.
Yeah.
I don't have it's a fictional movie, but Beetlejuice going after a teenager in 1988 works a lot better than it does now.
Yeah.
So I don't think that was even a thought in their mind. They would have
Right.
never gone that way.
For
Monica
that.
Bellucci, I heard recently. Now, this is what I heard recently on a podcast,
Tea.
that Tim Burton loves to put his love interests in real life in films.
Yeah.
Helena Bonham
hello,
Carter
yeah.
is one of
Her
them.
whole career.
Who is the other actress he dated back in the day? There was somebody else he dated back in the day, and he made her like a lead in one of his films. I can't think off the top of my head. But Tim Burton is now currently dating Monica Bellucci.
He is pulling some trade.
Good for Tim. Good for Tim. But I think that was a way for him to shoehorn her into the
movie.
film and having a significant role.
Yeah.
So that's if I had to honestly look at it objectively, I think those could be some of the reasons why that happened.
That makes sense.
But it hurts the movie ultimately.
Mhm.
And again, it's I think that unfortunately it could have been a great movie, and it becomes a good movie because of these things that were
Yes.
happening because of maybe the higher powers that be. Vinny, you talked about, you probably liked this movie a little bit less than we did anyway. So what were some of your major gripes before we get into the positives with the film overall?
Yeah, piggybacking right off of that, my biggest gripe was the whole Monica Bellucci subplot. Like, the marketing made it out to be that she was the main conflict of the film. It opens up with her character. And, like, I love Monica Bellucci. Like, she's an incredible actress. And here, also, Tim Burton's game is crazy. I don't know, like,
I didn't know
absolutely
that.
crazy. I remember, anyhow, that's a whole other topic for another day. But she barely has any dialogue in the film. Like, she shows up, she's like, where's Beetlejuice? I'm gonna kill Beetlejuice. Then we see her kill two people without really saying anything.
Nope.
And then she shows up at the end, Beetlejuice, and dies immediately. Her whole subplot, which felt like was going to be the main driving conflict, was completely sidelined. And then the whole resolution, where that could have been a great moment to have her like this super chaotic climactic scene at the end where you have the police coming in, it's like FBI. Like, I love the editing though. Just a little positive. The editing of that scene was great, jumping between the two musical cues to like the outside of the police raid, and then to the wedding inside that's just going absolute chaos. But then to add to the chaos, Monica Bellucci's character shows up and she dies. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, the resolution to that, there is no resolution. No. It was just completely such a sour note. And even the Jeremy subplot, I think the resolution to that, where it's like, okay, whoa, what's going on here? And then the whole swapping places of afterlife and then living life. I will say that's probably the funniest joke of the film, when Beetlejuice is like, shit out of luck, and then just drops him into the
trap
pit.
door.
Yeah.
Something out of Bugs Bunny.
That was my probably my favorite joke. But still, that subplot was a little kind of on like a sour note, and I was like, okay, like it felt like they were gonna do so much more, and then it just like.
I actually thought when she went over his house for the first time and they didn't show the parents.
I thought the parents were dead.
Mm.
And he was alive.
I thought it was going to be Gina Davis and Alec in a weird way. I didn't know how they were going to do it, and it probably wouldn't have even made sense. But because there's also that line in the film
They
where
found a way to cross over.
Exactly. Where she's basically like, we worked out a deal. So that was
Girl.
already in my head. And I'm like, oh, and Gina Davis is obviously working a little bit more. I mean, Alec Baldwin is still a working actor, even though he's
He is, yeah.
very problematic currently with what's happening in his professional life.
I don't think he would be as problematic as, I don't remember his other name.
Jeffrey,
yeah, him.
Jeffrey James or Jeffrey Jones, who was in the original film, of course.
We'll get to
that.
His appearances.
Obviously. But that was where I thought they were going to go with that. And I was like, that would have been a fun way for them to still have another original character come in. And then it would have been, because Astrid wouldn't have even known who they were anyway.
Yes.
And then still you would have had the interaction with Winona's character
Yeah.
Lydia coming in and being like, oh my God, what are you guys doing here? Like all this stuff. But so the Jeremy stuff didn't bother me as much. But then once you know what's happening, and then that also takes so much time. And the Soul Train sequences, which like, again, well choreographed, didn't need to be there for as long as it was. Yeah, I agree. So those were definitely some things that stood out to me. I thought that the big comedic sequences worked really well in this film. The one thing that we do get by getting Monica Bellucci's character Dolores is we get the hilarious telling from Beetlejuice of how they met in the old school sort of retro film during the Black Plague.
And
talking in Latin or whatever he's talking. I don't even know. He's talking in Latin, right?
Italian, I believe.
Yeah, it's Italian. Yeah.
So he's just like, that's a great sequence.
Oh my God.
So we don't get that if we don't have her character. But at the same time, you could have just had him do that as an aside story, and still had Monica Bellucci's character show up to give her a role in the film. And
the flashback, and then she's not.
Exactly. So those were definitely the two biggest things to me. Was there anything else that stood out as major negatives to you, or things that just didn't live up to the hype of the original?
I do have one thing that this is, it's, as me being me, V. Neal was not the makeup artist for this movie. It was Colleen Atwood, who is amazing. Sweeney Todd, Sleepy Hollow, she's fantastic. But V. Neal is the queen of that sort of spooky makeup, under eye whole thing that Tim Burton does. I mean, she did so many of his movies. She did Penguin. She's done so much of his work, and I was so confused as to why she wasn't on the film, and I actually never really looked it up. Colleen Atwood did an amazing job. Beetlejuice looked great. I actually like that they used his age. Michael Keaton's being older. They used it really nicely for his makeup, I think. But I definitely noticed, as someone who has that sort of Tim Burton magnifying glass, I definitely noticed the differences in quality and style of makeup. So that was something that I tried. It kind of kept pulling me out of focus for a second, and I had to redirect myself.
Did you know that when you went into the movie?
Yeah,
You already knew that?
I knew she was not the makeup artist.
Okay, I'm actually going to look and see.
Is there going to be tea? I hope not.
I'm
I hope they're
looking
best
to
friends
see.
still. She also might just not be working.
Yeah, so the last film she worked on was in 2019. She did actually just do the special effects makeup for the Michael Jackson biopic coming out, though.
Interesting.
But that was the first thing that she has done since 2019 when she did a Netflix movie called The Highwaymen. But that's it.
I mean, it also might just be the amount of work that movie would take.
It's possible. I mean, she has a very extensive career. She's done a lot. I mean, she did the Hunger Games films. She did X-Men Days of Future Past. She did Stars Born. That's all the more recent stuff. Obviously, Sweeney Todd, like you talked about. Pirates, The Caribbean. She did Austin Powers. I mean, she's a crazy extensive career.
The queen of
but
spooky makeup.
I didn't necessarily. There were some sequences that I definitely felt like it was a little bit less. It was like less extensive, the way that they kind of focused on. Like there were certain sequences where there were just characters that were blue, and I was like, that's not real. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if that's
Dafoe's makeup bothered the shit out of me. That prosthetic, I wanted to do that to my head every time I saw it because I was so upset with the prosthetic. And that's, oh God.
No, but I can totally understand. And it wasn't something that took me out of the movie, but I can understand. I mean, I don't think it's as well done as the original film.
Right.
So I think that's fair. Vinny, any more gripes before we get to the positives?
I just thought it's not particularly a gripe, but I guess it really depends on the perspective you're coming from. Because I thought the film was fairly funny. I was laughing. My theater did not think it was funny. There was like no one laughing in my theater, and I was in a packed theater. I was like the only one laughing. So I don't know if that's just me or so. It might not hit as well as others. I will say there's some moments where there's some cringe dialogue, but it's not overwhelming. It's not like crazy bad. But yeah, it's just that juggling act that we all we keep mentioning. That's the biggest thing that's weighing down this film.
Yeah, I wonder if it's like a weird thing too, where like people are like afraid to laugh in theaters nowadays. Like I feel like, because I mean, I had a similar experience. I had not a completely crowded theater, but I would say half my theater was full, and there were like 3 different times where I like started to laughing.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is so weird that we're like why can I hear myself laugh over everybody else laughing? It's because I'm the one that's like signifying it's an okay time to laugh, which felt weird. There were definitely some moments too that I could definitely feel the awkwardness. I didn't love Jenna Ortega in this film. I don't know if it was because she didn't have a lot to do. But the original cast that comes in this film like perfectly embody exactly who they were in the original film, as we kind of transition to the positives. Catherine O'Hara is a treasure, and I thought she was great in the first film, but I think also because now I love Schitt's Creek, and I've watched all of Schitt's Creek. There's so many insane moments with her character that are so great.
Give her one of the National Medals of Honor just for being Catherine O'Hara. Just throw it at her because she deserves it.
She's great, and I think she elevates some of the material in this film. In the first movie, I think that the script is probably a little tighter, but in this one, there are moments that, even though it's taking up time, it's really great moments of. I mean, the scene with the snakes is great. I mean, it's just like her death is so her that it's amazing. And then Keaton, obviously, we were talking off camera, Rachel, that people were questioning what is like Keaton's defining role in his career. Is it Batman or is it Beetlejuice? And I've seen both now.
Yeah.
I would say that I'm always going to remember him now more as Beetlejuice than Batman. And obviously we're younger, so we grew up with a lot more Batmen since he did it.
That's true.
So I also think perspective is important. But having seen this movie recently, like, I wouldn't want to see, nor could I see anybody else playing this character other than him with his portrayal. And I actually recently saw in this video that was posted, I don't know if you know the history of this movie and all this stuff, but he was like the third choice.
Yes.
It was originally Sam Kinison, who was a crazy stand-up, like super dirty.
Yes.
And would like, and I actually like, in context, I was like, I actually think he would have been it would have been a different movie.
It would have been raunchy.
But a crazy Beetlejuice. And then Sammy Davis Jr. was the second choice.
Yes.
And then they finally went to Keaton, who was a stand-up first at the time, and then winded up getting Beetlejuice, then getting Batman with Burton. And there was so much hinging on this movie at the time, because think about all the careers that were launched because of this movie, how horror movies were trending in a way in which they were trying to also be comedic, so they had more of a wider appeal. Like Ghostbusters was a few years before this, but obviously the same sort of thing. And I think Keaton's, I mean, it stood the test of time. There are still people dressing as Beetlejuice even before this movie came out for Halloween year after year, and the characters in the film. And getting to see a mature version of Winona in this is also great, because Lydia as a character is another one that's beloved by so many people. So I thought the 3 of them did a great job coming back, and I thought Justin Theroux had some really great moments. He had some other moments that weren't as great, but I did like some of the things that I think he fits in that family a lot better than Dafoe and Bellucci did. And that might have been a script thing. That might have been something else, because I actually read before we started recording that he also was talking to the co-writers, having meetings over Zoom when he was cast, and he was a co-writer on Tropic Thunder, so he has experience working in comedy, and he has experience working as a screenwriter. So I think that his character worked a little bit better for me than Dafoe and Bellucci, but those were the positives in terms of the performance. I know you, being a fellow actor, would love to talk about the performances, so go off.
Oh man. Okay, so Catherine O'Hara. I mean, hello. So in my brain, Delia walked so Moira could run. So when I think that Delia was born back in 1989 Beetlejuice, and there was this like wacky redheaded crazy woman who her voice is so distinct too, and then just add money and I presume wine, and you get Moira Rose from Schitt's Creek. Just this amplified version. And I think that you see elements of both of those, and they're not her only two best characters. I just think that they are closely related if you really look at them. But I think Delia has one of the best lines of dialogue in the universe in the original Beetlejuice of, if you do not let me gut out this house and make it what I want, I will go insane and I will take you with me. That is gold. And the way she delivers it, it's just put it in the Louvre. But she's untouchable in my head. She's just untouchable. Michael Keaton, as I said, I think he's one of the best, if not the best character actor. Watching him physically as I movement teacher also, watching him and his character and where the character is based off of in him is so fascinating and so right, and just it sits so beautifully in his body. And I think, you think about Beetlejuice, you think of the gut and you think of the head turns back and forth, right?
Yeah.
And he just, the way that his body just changes is incredible to watch, and his voice obviously and everything. Winona, love her. Put her everywhere. Jenna Ortega. I have not had any experience with Jenna Ortega. I'm a bad goth girl. I haven't watched Wednesday. But because, again, I keep my favorites, Addams Family being one of them. My dog's name is Wednesday. Very close to my heart, and I'm very reluctant to let anything else in.
Yeah.
So I haven't watched it because I'm afraid of it being just sort of nostalgia grabby, like we were talking about. Justin Theroux, I think, was really funny. I think he fit in really well. There were moments that I didn't like as much. But I think overall, the casting fit everyone well. Were they all necessary is a different story. But I think that casting-wise, the originals are perfect, and the additions they made actually made sense in the world. It didn't make me think, if Timothée Chalamet was in it, no offense, Timothée, I love you, but that would have made no sense to me,
Yeah. Vinny, I do want to get your take on something that we've been alluding to a little bit, but there's a character in the original film, Charles Dietz, plays the father and husband of Delia, and he had some trouble with the law, so he obviously was not going to be in this film. Tim Burton does a very fun and creative way of showcasing the character without showcasing the performer by giving us a stop motion sequence in which we see him what we think is plummeting to his death, and then Delia is one to say, oh, no, he didn't die in a plane crash. He was eaten by a shark. And we see that whole sequence, and then we actually see in live action a body that is just with a shark bite out of it, sort of representing Charles in the film. What did you think about Burton's approach to trying to do something different with still being able to make it significant, because we needed that as a plot device, and sort of the turning, like the beginning of the film essentially is that they needed to bring all these characters together for a reason. What did you think about the way that Burton handled it and handled that whole situation in general?
I think it was right on, actually. I was going into this questioning because I was aware of the whole situation. He's not a good person, and I was just curious. I was like, are they gonna recast him? Like, what's gonna go on, right? So they use claymation, and it's a very funny sequence. And then to see, at first I actually didn't realize that was supposed to be him when he walked into the dry cleaners, and then I was like, and then it was later when he gets into the waiting lobby. And then I'm like, oh shit, that's supposed to be Charles.
Yeah.
I thought it was clever. I thought it was a really nice. It was a very artistically interesting and captivating, to say the least, way to handle such a messy situation. So I think there is definitely some credit to be deserved in that area. Yeah, I mean, you guys basically covered all the bases when it comes to the positives of this film for me. Like, the performances are great. I mean, you went on about Catherine O'Hara. She's incredible. One of my favorite lines from the original is when she walks to the bathroom and she goes, "Oh, an indoor outhouse." And that's like one of my favorite lines from the original. And she has some great lines here. I like the moment where Winona Ryder, where Lydia and Catherine O'Hara's character, why am I blanking?
Delia?
Delia.
Yeah. Lydia and Delia are so similar.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, you know.
When Lydia and Delia are on the porch and they're talking about Jenna Ortega's character, like, what do I do with my daughter? Like, she's completely resenting me. And they have a nice, I like that dialogue exchange. And then it ends with Delia going, where's my 14-year-old goth girl that used to annoy me so much? Yeah. I thought that was really sweet. Other than that, like, it's a fine movie for me. You know, the wackiness hits. It's funny, but there's nothing too special here to like have a place in my heart like the original.
Yeah. You already touched on your favorite comedic moment, so give a moment for if you have one or some that stick out to you. Mine was, and I'm blanking on what song it was now. But it was when they show
MacArthur Park, baby.
Yes.
Yep.
Like, that was also the biggest laugh in the theater by far for my crowd. Like, it was just such a great sequence. And I love how they use the lip syncing throughout this franchise because every single one hits. Every time they do it, it still works and it's still really funny. And it's weird because I think of that show that used to be on, I think it was like Spike TV when they do lip sync battle. I always thought, I was like, this is kind of corny. It's a little too much. But in the Tim Burton world and the way that he does it and how extravagant it becomes in cinema, I think it works so well for these characters and so well for this world that like I could just rewatch those sequences over and over and over again. So that was the big one for me.
Yeah.
What was it for you, or a couple maybe that stick out for comedy bits?
One thing that I just kept laughing at, and then Willem Dafoe's character, you know, he didn't need to be there. But every time you saw him, that woman was handing him a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
I think that is one of the funniest things.
And he's never drinking it, by the way. He's never drinking it. I love the one. That's the best one. I feel like when he's like, that's it. He just throws it. Yeah. It's a garbage can filled with empty coffee.
He's in the church. She walks up with a cup of coffee. He's he's in the afterlife. He walks up with a cup of coffee. It was just that really just got me. You gotta
keep it real.
He's just
he's a treasure. Like, again,
relevant or not,
I think Willem Dafoe being in a Tim Burton movie is a reward for everybody, and the character's funny. There's just not, it doesn't work necessarily for the plot. It doesn't need to be there. But I do think that's a great callback too. But we've talked about this movie now for close to an hour, so let's get into overall scores. And you can wrap it up with your final thoughts if you would like. I'll start because you've never done this before, so I'll just prep it for you. I agree with what both of you guys basically said. I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's a great movie. Will I return to it? Sure. There's a lot of moments in it that I did enjoy. I think that this is perfect a year from now when we're watching Freeform and you have Beetlejuice and it's followed up by Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. It's going to play well for families. But I definitely do also think that you should definitely see this movie in a theater because I think it adds to the experience. Hopefully you get some more lively theaters than Vinny and I had. I don't know. I don't know what your theater was like. Maybe you can give us a little bit on that. Did you see it opening night?
No, I saw it Saturday.
Okay, so you saw it still opening weekend.
Pretty opening, yeah. Weekend, If Tim Burton's doing it, I'm going to see it.
Yeah, and this is the first movie he's done
in a while.
In a minute, because he was working on Wednesday. I just want to double check. So he was doing. Let's see. Before Wednesday, he did Dumbo.
Yeah.
Live action Dumbo, which was in 2019. And then before that, it was Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Yeah. That was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So he hasn't been working on a lot of stuff, but it was fun to see him return to this fantasy, comedy, darker, horror sort of world that is very indicative of what he created and what they were able to make with the first film. But overall, I'm going to give it a 7.3. I can't get it to a 7.5. because to me that's like it's approaching like a very very good movie.
Mm.
To me, I think it's solid. I think it's something that, like I said, I'll return to. There's comedic bits that I like, but overall it is not as good as the first film. But I think it does an admirable job in comparison
Yeah.
to a lot of these legacy sequels. It does a really good job of holding up and sort of expanding the story in certain ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rachel.
Oh man. Okay. So yeah, I mean, as a traditionalist of all things Tim Burton and spookiness and an actor and a director and blah 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 blah. I think I can land it at 7.5 because I think it does a great job of paying homage to the original. I think it does a great job of not banging us over the head with it, you know. Tim Burton's a genius because Bob is going to be everywhere.
Mhm.
Everywhere. Bob is
Mhm.
going to be all over. Bob for Halloween. Give me a little figurine of Bob. I want it all. Just genius. Because now he's going to make even more boatloads of money off of this movie because of Bob. I think it was really creative the way they got rid of Charles. I actually think it was probably the best way to do it because recasting, everyone would have been talking about it. Saying, oh, he left me and whatever, everyone would have been talking about it. But I think addressing it and still getting around it was the perfect way to do it. And on the blood spurting when he talks got me every time.
Yeah.
It got me every single time. It got me together.
When she sees him and she goes, Charles!
Charles!
Squirts all over her.
Oh god.
So crazy.
The one thing about that sequence, don't jump over the table and fight me. So, love that song. That sequence was really funny. I think it could have been 30 seconds shorter.
Okay.
It's an 8.5-minute long song,
Mm.
and it's an amazing song. Donna Summer, hello. But after a certain point, I was very in tune with the fact that it was still going. And you don't ever want to think, oh, it's still happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I mean, up in the air, twirling and dancing and everyone lip syncing and all that different stuff. It was really good. Yeah, it's not going to be the original. No one's ever going to touch the original. But I'm happy that it took 36 years to do it because I think they did it right. So I give it a 7.5.
Okay. I like that. Vinny.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna be lower than both of y'all.
Yeah, I figured because you said you were a little bit lower on it.
Yeah.
Than us, yeah.
So I actually came out of this film immediately when I went on my letterbox. I was like, oh, that's a solid 7. But I'm gonna give this because just overall, just thinking about it a little bit more, I'm gonna give it a 6.5. That's gonna be my solid. I mean, I've expressed already everything I felt about the film. I think that's why I'm not giving it a 7, even though like right initially out of the theater I gave it a 7. Then I kind of moved it down to a 6.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm kind of settling in 6.5 because it's almost because I don't have enough to talk about the film. That's why it doesn't get anything higher.
Yeah.
It's like if I wanted this to be a higher rating, I would want to feel passionate about it, but I was like, okay, that was fun, but I'm not passionate about it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, it took us 36 years to get.
36
But
years in the making.
Yeah.
Beetlejuice. It's in theaters now. It's done a really good job. It's again, especially against a $100 million budget, it's already grossed 147 million worldwide, which means after marketing, it's probably already a little bit over. It's probably profited maybe around 15 million at this point. It's just going to continue to grow from there. And I think they did a good job with what they had. Like you said, Rachel, it took them a long time to get this made, but I thought that they did a really good job of sort of extending the story. We didn't talk about the ending. The ending is a very interesting thing that happens, and it definitely leaves the door open for a sequel.
Which I really hope they don't do.
I think it's totally going to happen.
I know.
But we'll see what happens. I think they had so much fun with it, and I think that Burton will come back. I think Winona will come back. I think Keaton will come back. And, of course, Catherine O'Hara as well. I don't know who else might wind up coming back.
In my soul, something tells me that they had to have signed on for 2.
If
that's how they ended, I think maybe not legally binding, but I think that in the
if
conversation,
this goes well, we're doing a second one or a third one, no matter what.
This is how it's going to end, and number 3 is probably coming down.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment to make. But that was our full review. We did non-spoiler thoughts, then we went into a full spoiler talk on Beetlejuice. Be sure to go to the theater to check this out if you guys can. Also, you can follow us on all different types of social media. All that stuff is going to be listed right below me and also in our description. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, we're on Facebook, we're on Threads. We're everywhere right now. We're doing a bunch of other stuff. We have our Emmy predictions coming up ahead of the awards. We also have our review is going to be coming up for The Perfect Couple, which is a new show on Netflix that Liz and I are going to cover. And we got a lot of other stuff upcoming for you guys. Vinny and I are going to cover The Penguin when that comes out on HBO and HBO Max. So be sure to look out for that. And hopefully Rachel will be coming on another few times to talk about some of the other things that come out this year. So I'm just going to sign off. I'm Darian Scalamoni, and thank you, Rachel Ciani, for joining us.
So welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Vinny,
So long.
thanks for being here, and we'll see you guys next time.
This is The Culture.